Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. My macro thoughts start with Jim Rogers, who says why I'm bullish on Russia. And this is on Bloomberg TV, and I think I've got to agree with him, although the impasse suddenly does look extremely entrenched. Jim Rogers explains why he's bullish on Russia. He speaks with Mark Barton, and I think he's got a point. The value of the Russian stock market is so egregious now. Home thoughts turn to the snow peaks of Kilimanjaro, taken not too long ago this year, and back to Paul Virilio, and basically his declaration that the logic of acceleration lies at the heart of the organization and transformation of the modern world. Virilio's theoretical work stems from his central claim that in a culture dominated by war, the military-industrial complex is of crucial significance in debates over the creation of the city and the spatial organization of cultural life. In Speed and Politics, for example, Virilio offers a credible war model of the growth of the modern city and the development of human society. Thus, according to Virilio, the fortified city of the feudal period was a stationary and generally unassailable war machine, coupled to an attempt to modulate the circulation and the momentum of the movements of the urban masses. Therefore, the fortified city was a political space of habitable inertia, the political configuration and the physical underpinning of the feudal era. Nevertheless, for Virilio, the essential question is, why did the fortified city disappear? His rather unconventional answer is that it did so due to the advent of the ever-increasingly transportable and accelerated weapon systems. For such innovations exposed the fortified city and transformed siege warfare into a war of movement. Additionally, they undermined the efforts of the authorities to govern the flow of the urban citizenry and therefore heralded the arrival of what Virilio calls the habitable circulation of the masses. Unlike Marx, then, Virilio postulates that the transition from feudalism to capitalism was not an economic transformation, but a military, spatial, political, and technological metamorphosis. Broadly speaking, where Marx wrote of the materialist conception of history, Virilio writes of the military conception of history. He's a very interesting man. Political reflections. He radiated coldness, one official said of the encounter. Putin has dug himself in and he can't get out, or a giant wall has been erected around him. Put up a photograph of him. Hunting for scapegoats, Obama bagged the wrong guy in Hegel as a headline in Reuters, and I think that's right. And then I came across a number of photographs going back to Virilio's steel helmet with skull bone fused by atomic bomb, Nagasaki, 1963. Another photograph, Sophie Ristelhuber's aerial views of the desert landscape of Kuwait after the First Gulf War evoked the technology of modern warfare, which relies on aerial bombardment, surveillance, and missile strikes. And then, 70 years after the end of the Spanish Civil War, Luc de la Haye photographed the forensic exhumation of a mass grave containing the bodies of executed Republican prisoners. I couldn't resist this. Hot Page Info tweeted, "No-fly zone declared over Ferguson. Flights diverted because of gunshots being fired into the sky." And then this AFP photo, riot police engulfed in tear gas during Ferguson clashes. And it's pretty extraordinary, the sight and the scenes that we're seeing. And the Pope, who I follow on Twitter, says, "There is so much noise in the world. May we learn to be silent in our hearts and before God." Put up a photograph of him doing a selfie. And then I'd written earlier this year, picking up the signal through the noise of our world in 2014 is no easy thing. Currency markets, the euro bounced a little bit higher, 124.72, dollar index back below 88, 87.91, Japanese yen 117.84. It touched 118.98 on November 20, which was the weakest level for the yen since August 2007. Swiss franc 0.9643, pound 156.96, Aussie 0.8534, touched 0.8514 yesterday, which was the lowest since July 2010. The governor, Glenn Stevens, warned last week there was a pretty material risk that the currency will go lower. Iron ore futures slid 2.7%, and iron ore is Australia's largest export. India rupee 61.84, South Korean won 1106.91, Rial 253.04, strengthened 0.6%. Egyptian pound 715.05, and the rand is back below 11 at 1096.79. The yen has of course dropped 7% in the past month, Aussie 1%, dollar has risen 2.3%, euro is up 0.5% as well. South Korean won down 3.6%, the rand has in fact gained 0.7%, but really it's been a story of dollar strength, yen weakness. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart. US GDP was upgraded to a 3.9% annualized rate in the third quarter, making this the strongest 6 months in a decade. And I spoke about this before. I think we'll continue to see a strengthening in the US. That's what informed my view in August when I said the dollar has been punching higher, things tip big, the dollar might soar. September the 1st, I said the dollar's embarked on a meaningful and broad-based rally. And then on September the 29th, I also said the point I'm making is that the dollar has just started getting going. Euro dollar 124.72, it's bounced. That was a congestion zone down there. And but I think we will see a one-to-one print, parity print next year. And I'll put up a chart of the dollar versus the Russian ruble, which is a perfect example of currency warfare. Euro area yields dropped to records as Dutch borrowed at an all-time low. Germany's 10-year declined to 0.75%, approaching the record 0.715% set on October the 16th. Portugal at an all-time low of 2.906%. Spanish securities have earned 14% this year through yesterday. I expect negative euro area inflation in the not too distant future, and I think clearly eventually there's going to be a QE program which will involve buying a lot of these bonds. Quaglino, which was a restaurant I used to go to many years ago in London, has made its glamorous return, according to Richard Vines in Bloomberg. Okay, you're not going to get lobster and caviar, but I enjoyed that game terrine followed by corn-fed chicken, sautéed mushrooms and truffle vinaigrette. Sounds pretty good. Crude oil fell $1.69 yesterday, 2.2% to $74.09 a barrel, lowest settlement since September 2010. It's certainly possible that if there is absolutely nothing that comes out of OPEC, which is my view, you're going to see the downward trend resume, probably getting to $60 at least. No one knows what OPEC is going to do. They're going to do diddly squat. And I wrote about this on the 13th of October when I wrote Who Kneecapped Oil, and I put out a target of $50 a barrel then. The conditions, and I will explain them momentarily, are optimal for a complete washout. A blow-off bottom was a more earthy description in my time. Down as far as $50 a barrel. markets overshoot, crude oil does it big time. I said then any and every model needs to consider such a price outcome. I call the US administration psycho and saying that oil had been sliced up real good. And I was saying that the US is now the new price setter for the oil markets, and this is a deep and important geopolitical development. Put up a 5-day chart of crude oil, we're down near some lows here, and a 6-month chart as well, and I also put up a photograph of the oil ministers of Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE, all of whom will follow Saudi Arabia's instruction. And I think Saudi Arabia wants to inflict a bit more pain. Gold, 1199.60. Gold climbed 70% from December 2008 to June 2011. But through last week, gold has declined 0.3% this year, and that was after falling 28% last year. I think it's going lower. Iron ore has dropped below $70 for the first time since 2009. The Mellon estate had a sale and fetched $280 million, led by Rothko, says Bloomberg. And I love this. The auction of Rachel Bunny Lambert Mellon, Bunny, what a lovely name, offered collectibles from a $39.9 million Rothko to a rabbit-shaped doorstop for more than $5,000. Anyway, what was sold was a blue diamond weighing 9.75 carats, sold for $32.6 million at Sotheby's, and then one of the Rothkos looked very beautiful, yellow, light orange, and I'll put that up as well. But I like that, Rachel Bunny Lambert, and basically saying that because of whoever this lady was, there was quite a premium paid for a number of items. An economy that used to be on its back is now an economy on its knees and getting back up to its feet. That was a line about Iran. But the point I was making yesterday was brinkmanship is very expensive. I think they wanted that release valve, that escape velocity that would have come from sanctions being lifted, and keeping the lid on it now presents a lot of risks, not least of which some of the recalcitrants can now regroup and fight harder. And President Obama's influence starts to decline as you near the end of your term. Coming to Africa, Zimbabwe's Vice President Joyce Mujuru has been ousted from the ruling party's Central Committee, the state-owned Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation reported. Mujuru had been publicly attacked by Mugabe's wife Grace in recent weeks, with the president's wife accusing her of treason and demanding that she resign. The state-controlled Sunday Mail newspaper reported that she was implicated in a plot to kill Mugabe. Mujuru denied the allegations. And as I said previously, in President Mugabe's absence or his departure, President Grace Mugabe is just simply not tenable. And that is one of the signals out of Ouagadougou, in my opinion. They achieved escape velocity in a situation without Bob Mugabe around. I think you're going to have an extraordinary scenario develop. And if I were Grace Mugabe, I would be working out a different strategy at this point in time. Visa have put out a very interesting piece of research, the Visa Africa Integration Index. Currently, whilst Africa may be the world's fastest growing continent, it is also the world's least globalized or internationally integrated region, far less connected to the global economy and its value chains than the likes of emerging Asia, Latin America, Central America, Eastern Europe to boot. Africa is also the least integrated internally. According to Visa, the 4 drivers at Africa's great rush forward are robust commodity prices and new sources of demand, improved economic management and policy platforms, debt relief and sustained debt improvement, and the demographic dividend. By 2060, Africa's population could reach 2.7 billion, with a middle class of more than 1 billion people. Its economically active population could by then have tripled, providing the basis for consistently high levels of economic growth. As such, Africa's demographic configuration, embodying a young, growing population, represents a fourth important structural factor that has impacted the region's prospects positively in the last decade. That's saying export volumes have grown at an average of 8.8% per year since 2000 versus the world average of 3.7%, reflecting global demand for African products and services. Africa's export growth exceeded economic growth, albeit modestly. Exports have become a relatively more important component of the region's economy since 2000. New trade partners, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. In 2001, African economies exported $24 billion in goods and services to these four economies. By 2011, this figure had grown nearly tenfold to $194 billion. Interesting piece of research, and there's also an index infographic, and if you go to Rich Wrap-Ups you can have a look at that. Ethiopia plans a debut foreign currency bond joining Ghana and Kenya, we know about that. South African all share up 9.19% in 2014, edged 0.43% lower yesterday. Dollar rand back below 11, I think it's going to head towards 12, and it's a trading sell below 11. Egyptian pound steady as you like, 715.03. Egyptian stock market up 34.355% in 2014, eased 0.48% yesterday. Nigerian all share bounced 0.71% yesterday. It remained 17.455% lower in 2014. I spoke about Nigeria being in the eye of the storm over the weekend. I said the big game changer for Nigeria has been the free fall in the price of crude oil. And I was saying, Nigeria is collateral damage in a red-hot crude oil and geopolitical war, where the US and Saudi Arabia have tipped the oil markets into surplus in order to exert enormous pressure on Russia in particular, among others. And I said, Nigeria will be hoping that OPEC will be hoping for a Hail Mary pass from OPEC. And I said the OPEC outcome I foresee was described by a fellow called Hakan to Bloomberg on November 14. If OPEC does nothing, I think we're seeing this market get really trashed, another $10 from where it is. And then I referred to IH, International Crisis Group report, which said an Islamist insurgency and a polarizing campaign for the presidency, pitting candidates from the mainly Muslim north against an incumbent from the largely Christian south, point to a very perilous contest whose results may also be disputed. And I said, the fracas in Parliament, which we saw, is a signal of a potentially very dysfunctional situation. I'll put up a photograph of President Goodluck Jonathan. Then we learned 2 explosions by suspected female suicide bombers hit Maiduguri, and deaths, I think, were between 40 and 50. There were 2 blasts, all suicide bombers. I saw lots of bodies. I'll take you back to Abu Bakr Shekau and his Jonathan, bring back our army. If you haven't seen that video, it's on Rich Wrap-Ups, have a look at it. I wrote about him in April 2014 when he taunted President Goodluck Jonathan with the comment, "I'm in your city." And I asked, or is it cities? This insurgency tail risk, I wrote again about in September. And I said, are we ahead of the curve or behind the curve in matters of insurgency? Are we headed into a new Waziristan-type normal? And I said the insurgency tail risk remains, and how it plays out will have important consequence for ourselves and the entire Africa Rising narrative. The Naira's official peg was moved to 168 per dollar from 155, and the central bank raised its benchmark interest rate for the first time in 3 years. The rate was raised 100 basis points to a record high of 13%. Given market turmoil, the depletion of official reserves by $1.5 billion month to date, and the surge of the dollar globally, the committee does not have the option of leaving its stance unchanged. So an interesting response. I think, I was saying the currency was headed to 200. I think actually it was quite a nuanced response. They put up interest rates. They didn't go too crazy because they knew the economy couldn't take it, but they signaled that they are aware of it. But I think they're very beholden to the oil price, and the oil price looks as if it's going to tank again, in my view. And the Naira fell 2% to 177.55 in the interbank market. Nigeria's foreign reserves dropped to a 5-month low of 37.2 billion on November 21st, down 15% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange up 5.9207% year to date. Ethiopia is coming out with a dollar bond. Kenya tapped its existing euro bonds, and basically, in Kenya's case, the order book was $3.25 billion for $750 million, confirming once again the outstanding appetite for African debt. And the point I was making in November on the 17th, when I quoted Scarface, "You short a couple of million. I go on the street for you, I make a couple of moves, a million here, a million there, you got it." Well, in this case, 750 million. Africa fast off the blocks in adopting Internet of Things. This is an interesting piece talking about the new Internet where you're controlling all this machinery. In Africa, sometimes you can leapfrog and go to the latest in innovation and technology at the same time. It is absolutely excellent. Returning to Kenya, KCB plans to offer mortgage-backed securities on the local bourse to help developers raise funds to build new housing units. This is Joshua, the CEO. If you haven't seen the interview I did with him not too long ago, do have a listen. That link is on the website as well. Nairobi tops an index of most strategic city for multinationals eyeing Africa. This is that visa integration index again. Nairobi is the most attractive due to its expansive dual air connectivity with the world, as well as other African countries. Kenya Transport Hub, preferred investment destination for multinationals. I put up a photograph of a rainbow over Nairobi taken not too long ago. Kenyan police used tear gas to disperse demonstrators shouting "President, stop the killings" outside President Kenyatta's offices on Tuesday. I'll put up an image of a protester lying on top of wooden crosses symbolizing people killed in a series of attacks during the Occupy Harambee protest in Nairobi. Kenya shilling 90.247, not far off a 3-year low, I think. Nairobi all share up 18.038% and 2.5083% below a record closing high from the 23rd of September this year. NSE 20 up 4.2833%. Stock market yesterday, and do remember, if you register on rich.co.ke, get a password, you can then go to Rich Live and track the markets in real time, supply, demand, prices. During trading hours, the Nairobi All-Share snapped a losing streak yesterday, ticked higher, marginally, lifted by big caps like Safaricom, which was up 0.743%, and EABL, which was up 0.68%. Williamson Tea rebounded, as did Limuru Tea. This is all about the net asset value of these tea companies rather than their earnings. Safaricom announced that they're going to construct a security system worth $165.2 million for the government. It rallied strongly. Scan Group was up. Uchumi Rights traded 24.043 million times. That's very interesting. That's a very big position that someone's taken on, and surged to close at 49 cents. Equity Bank has been on a bit of a losing streak of late. It's now corrected 21.61% since setting an all-time high at the end of September. And Mumias was trading at 210 yesterday at the close. This has rebounded from 140, a more deeply oversold position. Once again, thank you for stopping by.